Welcome to Harlow on Healthcare. I'm David Harlow, and I invite you to join me by my virtual hearth as I sit down with healthcare leaders to discuss building the future of healthcare. Today, my guest is Ruchin Kansal, the Digital Business Strategy Leader for Healthcare Insurance and Life Sciences at Virtusa. Over the past 15 years or so, he's also worked in healthcare strategy consulting at Big Four consulting firms and as executive in charge of business innovation at Boehringer Ingelheim. He has written about innovation in healthcare and life sciences. He's received industry awards for his work, including a Medical Marketing and Media Healthcare Transformer Award. And we have passed each other in the physical or virtual hallways of Stanford University's Medicine X, where he's served on the board and I've been a speaker. We also share a passion for travel, but I think he has a few laps on me in that department. Welcome, Ruchin, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you, David, for having me on the show.
So there's a meme that says, if you want to go quickly, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And to me, that sums up one of the key tensions in the healthcare landscape today, sort of between the drive for rapid innovation and the value of strategic partnerships. I'm wondering if, to kick things off today, you could speak a little bit to what you mean or what we mean when we say strategic partnerships.
Absolutely, David. Like you said, it is very true that if you want to go far, you better partner. From a definitional perspective, partnerships really mean that they are a mechanism for two or more business entities to come together for a defined period of time and achieve a shared goal. Now, this is a really crucial time in healthcare, and what we are seeing is that the fragmentation that has historically been the hallmark of the US healthcare system, it is coming to a point where there is a lot of frustration among the patients, among the consumers of healthcare, and that is creating a lot of opportunities for new entrants like the Amazons, like the Apples, like the Googles of the world to come in and offer an alternative that provides the promise of better care, better responsiveness, better efficiency, better costs. And if that is the model that is being created and envisioned, we can almost agree that future of healthcare would be similar to future of retail, where these companies create large customer bases and then offer them a variety of products and services. And if that is a future that we agree with, how do the healthcare incumbents really react to that becomes a big question. The pharma companies, the providers, the payers, the pharmacy benefit managers, the pharmacies, all of the healthcare incumbents have been operating in their silos, and they have developed unique competencies within their silo. But now to compete with these new kind of healthcare entrants, they really need to think about how they can stitch together their competencies, come together and offer a viable alternative to the future being created by new entrants. And in my mind, strategic partnerships really become a basis for doing that. It is a way to come together, pool competencies, and create alternative, equally robust future of healthcare.
Right. So you talk about the drive in the direction of retail and that sort of customer centeredness and how maybe that is part of the future of healthcare. And I'm just reminded that over the course of decades, there have been these different trends in healthcare. And here I'm thinking about sort of hospital management and so forth, where at different points in time, it becomes trendy to talk about guest services and to hire people in from the hotel and hospitality industry. And then here we are again, sort of we've been through that cycle a couple of times. And now here we are again, and we're talking about what can healthcare learn for retail, or is healthcare going to be consumed by retail? What are the lessons that can be drawn from the past to inform future direction?
Yeah, no, I mean, you're very right. As an industry, we always have talked about patient centricity and designing care around the patient and have run various experiments to do that. But in my mind, the urgency and the need to operate in that fashion was never there in the past. The way the payments and delivery work in the current US health system, historically, a lot of the payments have come from employers and the government, and the patients have not really been as engaged in consumption of healthcare. Now, as we have looked at recent data, what we are finding is that if you look at the middle 60% of America, which is earning between $40,000 to $100,000, 30% are below that, 10% are above. But if you look at those middle 60%, their income growth has flattened, but the burden of healthcare dollars that they are facing has been increasing at a much rapid pace, and that gap is widening. And in my mind, in our minds, that is the balance that we have to look at. I think we are getting to an inflection point where the burden will be high enough that we as consumers will demand those services. It won't be a fad or a fashion anymore to differentiate yourself in the press that we are patient-centric, but it'll be a consumer-driven revolution. And that is what I think is different. The other thing that is different is the fact that, again, let me just take Amazon as an example for a minute. Amazon has 100 million paying Prime members, and they are using Amazon more and more for everything that they buy, whether it is products and or services. I can now go on Amazon and actually have a housekeeper come in, or a house cleaner come in, or a painter or a plumber come in. And Amazon has to grow. It has to show shareholder value, and healthcare is so messy. There is a big opportunity here to take share away. So they are going to, look at how they monetize these 100 million Prime members by offering them a plethora of healthcare services. And has that happened before? It has not. Is it going to happen now? It damn well. So between what's the power of these new entrants and the fact that you and I as patients, especially middle America, is feeling that burden, in my mind, the balance shifts now, and it's not a fad anymore. It is something that has to be solved for.
So we're talking about strategic partnerships, and Amazon obviously has famously announced that it's embarking in some sort of partnership, the outlines of which are not exactly clear yet, with Berkshire Hathaway and JP Morgan Chase. And so in the context of that partnership or other large healthcare strategic partnerships like Aetna and CVS, what are the lessons that these new partnerships should be drawing from history as they forge forward, do you think?
So I have direct experience actually setting up these partnerships. So when I was at Boehringer Ingelheim, one of the charges we took on was to really understand how we as a pharma company will offer our value in the future of healthcare. And one of the biggest challenges we faced in trying to answer that question was that as a pharma company, we today are a couple of steps removed from the patient, right? So it's the provider that sees the patient, it's the provider that prescribes the medication, it's the payer that pays for it, and we are somewhere back there as someone who supplies the product. The biggest challenge for us to understand then as to how care is delivered, paid for, experienced by patients, the biggest challenge was to finding that was this removal. And what we decided to do then is to figure out how we can leverage partnerships to solve for that. And during my tenure, we signed partnerships with Anthem, with Humana, with Sutter Health. This is all public information.
Sure.
And what we realized in the process of setting up those partnerships and actually driving those partnerships to a shared goal of driving patient centricity was that number one, above all, there has to be a clear strategic intent, right? So it's almost like, you're going out and asking for a marriage proposal. And so you have to have a very clear strategic intent as to why you want to have a partnership in place. It's not about driving your near-term stock price. It's not about, getting good press release. It is about really solving for something around which you can gather a rally of troops. And so, once we had a clear strategic intent, we did go out and, try to find a lot of partners. And then the second thing we realized in that is that there has to be very clear leadership commitment. This idea of a partnership, even with a good idea of what the intent is, it is serious stuff, and it takes a whole organization and organizations to really drive to a good outcome. And if there isn't a leadership commitment to try it, to embrace it, to embrace the fact there will be failures and uncertainty and unknown, and unless there is commitment for a sustained period of time, what we realized is that these partnerships will not yield any results. The third thing also was around structure and governance. And I mean, especially in healthcare, with the regulations, you have to be very careful about how you structure these partnerships, what's the governance structure, how decisions are made, how you really drive execution. And what we realized
right,
is...
and there's always the law of unintended consequences.
Exactly.
Pushing in on one side of the balloon and something else pops out somewhere else. Yeah.
Exactly. And so what we realized is that the partnerships that were successful had equal commitment of resources on both sides and equal commitment of execution, right? So we will, it's not just to experiment, but we will bring an equal amount of resources and execute the results in our environments with equal passion. And then, lastly, I would say it does come down to the fact of, you won't know everything as you go in. So be ready to embrace failure, be ready to be flexible. And ultimately, it boils down to, if you have the right intent and if you trust each other and if you put the right people in the mix, it is painful, but the end point is you have created something that is, really unique. I mean, that is from, what it takes to build partnerships. Now we are seeing many partnerships out there today, including ABC, and I'm sure that these are some of the principles that they are either applying or learning along the way.
If you're just tuning in, this is Harlow on Healthcare, coming to you on Healthcare Now Radio. I'm David Harlow, and my guest today is Ruchin Kansal, Digital Business Strategy Leader for Healthcare at Virtusa Consulting. Ruchin, you've written about something that you call the 80-80 rule. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about that.
So, David, the 80-80 rule, it states that being 80% confident that you will only be 80% right the first time should feel normal. And the reason we came up with this rule is, again, as we were looking to innovate across the healthcare ecosystem and learning along the way, one of the lessons we learned was the fact that, there is, given the cost of failure is so high, there is this desire to be 100% sure about everything before people do anything in healthcare, whether it is writing a contract, to whether it is taking on a project, or whether it is, allocating resources, you name it. And we, as a way to drive a change in culture and make people a little bit more okay with taking risk and embarking on the unknown, we decided to, really embody this idea of that, not taking chance is not an option. And it's okay to be 80% confident as you go in. And it's also okay to know that you may only be 80% right, but that should not keep you away from trying things. And in fact, if you were 100% confident, you were not looking for, the blind spots, and that actually is arrogance.
Yeah, you're probably wrong.
Exactly. And if you wait to be 100% right, someone else would have already done it.
Right.
So it's really about, taking risks, not taking, totally mad risks, taking informed risks, and then, trying to evolve is really something that we as healthcare ecosystem should embrace.
So, could you share an example within healthcare of where you've seen a strategic partnership succeed? You spoke a little bit about your experience with pharma and health insurer collaboration. Is there something specific that you could highlight or specific characteristics of a strategic partnership? You've talked about some of the ways in which folks can approach these partnerships, but any more detail to add some color to the description?
As I look around and I look for, some good examples of successes. In healthcare, these partnerships are relatively new in the US. However, there are some early signs of success, especially around partnerships that are formed to drive research around certain disease states and then, use those to develop algorithms for either prediction of diagnosis or effectiveness of treatment. And in fact, in my last role, we had quite a few successes in that area. I also see these days, companies like Apple, for example, and 40 health systems have come together to do the same thing, really let the patients in those health systems access their health records on Apple devices, but also then use that data to drive the right algorithms to inform diagnosis and treatment pathways. As I really look for a very, very good example, we actually found some outside of the US. China never had the incumbent healthcare ecosystem that we in the US have in the last 30 to 40 years. So they kind of leapfrog from not having a good healthcare ecosystem to having a little bit more modern or modernized healthcare ecosystem. And companies like Ping An, there, which used to be an insurance company, now actually offers a full end-to-end healthcare experience through its digital app called The Good Doctor. And what they've done is, between them and Alibaba and Tencent and all of these tech giants in China, they have about 700 million subscribing members. And they have now formed partnerships with everyone ranging from pharmacies to doctors to telemedicine companies to insurers, you name it. And what they enable you as a patient to do is go into their app, sign in, and then choose from this options that they have made available to you through their partnerships, and you now experience care through their platform. And in my mind, that's a very good example of a company entering into healthcare, leveraging strategic partnerships and not really trying to build everything on their own, but weaving an ecosystem that makes it very convenient for their members to experience care. So I would say I see that as a good example of how partnerships at scale can really be used to actually create a new business model, a new way of delivering care, a new way for patients to experience care.
I would agree. I think that solves one of the problems of engagement and activation of patients, which is what some people refer to as portalitis.
Yes.
Too many portals, right?
Yes.
If I had to log in to everything that I need to log in order to do what I need to do to manage my healthcare, my family's healthcare, it would take me all day. If it could all really be in one place, that would be fantastic. But so far, that hasn't really happened in a broad-based way.
Yeah, that's the idea of a super app, right? Rather than having these 50 apps on my phone, I have one app, and
right,
I
exactly.
enter in and I can consume healthcare, I can consume financial services, I can consume, So yeah, that's the idea. I mean, right now the phone is that portal, but there's a need to consolidate.
So do you think that some of these large companies that are now the technology companies that are making moves into healthcare will enable that either for, like the ABC initiative is initially for their own employees, but the Apple PHR, EHR initiative that you described is more broad-based than that. Do you see either of those as holding great promise for a broader distribution?
So I do, from the perspective of ease of access and convenience, right? So, I mean, in my mind, what ABC will do is it will figure out how to keep its employees across the three companies healthy at a lower cost, right? And they will experiment with everything from care models to preventive models to keeping you healthy using smart devices to prescriptions, etc., etc. And in my mind, once they have figured it out now, I mean, it is certainly a high bar they have to achieve. But if they can bring the cost down and keep their patients healthy even by 2020, so 20% cost down, 20% healthier, or a 40-40, there is no way or no reason why they would not then think about taking those lessons out to the broader population, right? And in my mind, at that point, Amazon actually provides them a good platform to really scale it out, just like Ping An did. Because if you think about it, Ping An is on all of our phones, and if they can, offer that service through that app, I'm sure they are thinking about it. Similarly, Apple is making a play around consumer healthcare devices that are medical grade with their Apple Watch that can now do an EKG. And they are doing this play of, having these devices dispersed around all of us that can help us monitor and manage our care. And then they will act as, in my mind, a lever that will embed into maybe a platform like an Amazon. And then Google is spending a lot of effort trying to partner with health systems to really become the underlying platform where all of the data sets and all of the analysis happens. So yeah, I mean, in my mind, the ecosystem that's being created will provide the backbone of that future. And we will see a lot of that happening. And in my mind, a CVS Aetna merger is a very good example of how incumbents can start to create their own alternative offerings to compete with that future that's being built.
In those examples, and maybe in others, do you see a problem with healthcare? People always say, well, healthcare is different, right? So is it not as easily scalable as, selling retail online because of the necessity to integrate the technical and the human?
Yeah. No, I mean, like they say, right, healthcare is very personal and very local. And what I'm seeing is that, as I see both sides of the equation, the CVSs, the Aetnas, today I believe Walgreens and LabCorp announced that they are going to open diagnostic centers at all Walgreens. And we have, again, the tech giants in the news every day. As I think about it, I think everyone is trying to, beginning to think about how they engage me where I am. And therefore, I think it takes away that problem of healthcare is very complex and then, it will never happen. Because if you put your focus on me and you and where we are and where we want to experience care and start to build around that, I think, the transformation will happen. It will absolutely take time, and incumbents will absolutely, use the levers that they have to delay this future as much as they can, because there are incentives to maintain the status quo. But in my mind, again, as I said earlier in the discussion, between the fact that 60% of middle America is feeling the heat in terms of dollars and the fact that these alternatives are being created, I think we will get towards that future sooner or later.
So that leads to my final question, which is always about the future. And if you were to wake up 5 years from now, what's the one thing in healthcare that you would hope or expect to be radically different from what we see today?
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of futuristic discussion about healthcare can sound futuristic, and and it almost is like utopia, right? You're trying to create this utopian future, but in my mind, cancer is one of those really key ones. It's the second leading cause of death in the world, 1 in 6 deaths today are caused by cancer. It costs upwards of $1 trillion to the world economy. And in my mind, we still have siloed approaches to solving for cancer. It is being solved in research labs, it's being solved in pharma company labs, etc., etc. But I would really want to see 5 years from now a global consortium. Payers have a lot of data, claims data. Providers have a lot of EMR, EHR data, biobank data. Pharma companies have a lot of data. I would really see, I look forward to that future where there's a global consortium that is really pooling these resources as a strategic, as an example of strategic partnership, which is global versus, 2 or 3 people coming together and then trying to solve for it, or actually having solved for it. In my mind, the data is there. In my mind, the expertise is there. In my mind, it will be complex, but a partnership which solves for it by pooling resources would be great. And I'm sure, everyone will benefit both economically and from a solution of disease perspective.
Well, that's a great vision for the future of real collaboration to solve broad-based human problems. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you, David, for having me. It was a pleasure.
You have been listening to Harlow on Healthcare. Join us at healthcarenowradio.com. Let's continue the conversation on building the future of healthcare together at #HarlowOnHC. I'm David Harlow, keeping the fire going and holding a seat open for you. Until next time.